You know how Trump, he didn't mean Slovenia, but like from the shithole of a country. What did Trump mean? Ecuador, I don't know what. But now you know that we have now a big shithole of a country, which is called United States. You know this. Okay, I talked too much.
So we are delighted to be joined for this episode of the Prospect Podcast by philosopher Slavoj Žižek. Slavoj, it's a pleasure to have you talking to us this morning.
Believe it or not, the pleasure is mine. Because I'm a male chauvinist. 1 man, 3 women, perfect.
We can talk about that later.
In your essay 0 Point, which where I'd like to kind of start this conversation, you argue that the left has reached a point where it must reinvent itself or perish. When did the left reach this point, and kind of how long has it been there?
We always read history a little bit retroactively from today's stance. If we do it like this, now my answer may shock you. I think retroactively we can say that the left reached this point at what appeared to many idiots its last glorious moment, 68, so-called revolution. But I think it was basically a false liberation. They wanted sexual freedom. Yes, we get total commodification of sexuality. They wanted the end of this brutal industrial work where you just are one moment in the chain. We get now precarious work, which is much worse. They wanted the end of academic, alienated up there university education. What are we getting now? We can see in the United States and in the UK. Look at Kingston, Dundee, and so on, universities, massive reduction of universities with the excuse that who needs that? But that's the whole charm of the university, because not to lose time. You know what's the duty of critical intellectuals? Not to solve problems formulated by others. My old motto is that the way we perceive a problem can often be part of the problem. So we, or me as a philosopher, I'm not saying I know how to deal with ecological crisis and so on, but what I am saying is that I can correct or point at the hidden biases of the way we formulate ecological crisis. You can see it as a pure technological problems. You can have a reactionary position. Let's return to some more organic, small community way of life, and so on and so on. This is what bothers those in power. They want higher education which serves concrete purposes. Like, we have a crisis here, tell us what to do. No, sorry. What interests me is, what crisis do you think we have? Is your perception of the crisis correct, or it's part of the crisis? I got lost, but you see, at least at that point, the so-called, let's call it culturalization of politics. By this I mean, instead of all these old good-fashioned terms, which are now more actual than ever, class struggle, economic exploitation, instead of analyzing, expanding this. For example, it's obvious today that ruining environment where some indigenous people live is also a form of exploitation. Marx didn't focus on this, but you see, we have to do this critical work. So today, I claim precisely, philosophy is more needed than ever to stop. If you are stupid enough to believe that I will stop, but I will. Just one point. Let's take artificial intelligence. Not just, it's not enough to say, oh, will it control us? We will control it. The elementary question is this one. Again, Zuckerberg and Musk announced next step. iPhones and so on are out. We will have a direct link between our brain and digital machines. What does it mean for our identity as subject? Let me, in my style, go directly to a vulgar level, but it's crucial here. Let's say I don't want to be accused of male chauvinism, so I will not address anyone concretely. Let's say that I'm flirting with one of you. Isn't the whole point of flirting that it's between the lines? I'm softly trying, we don't know. Imagine neural link where our brains directly communicate. There is no flirting. We look at each other and get the signal. I would like to do, I don't. It's the end of sexuality as we know it and so on. All these basic questions are philosophical questions.
So I want to go back a second to, you said the kind of the left died back in 1968.
Without knowing it.
Without knowing
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And now, we're looking at obviously Trump winning in the US, sort of symbolizing this victory of a global populist right. Are we seeing a continued slow death of the left in what's happened in America, or is this kind of only the aftermath of that death from many years ago?
It's both at the same time, because I think that the move towards, I'm afraid to use any terms because they are too narrow, but what we vaguely call the whole field of woke culture, cancel culture, however we call it, I must emphasize this. I sympathize absolutely with the goals of this. But I think the way they practice it, there is a hidden elitism. This is for me the most refined form of oppression. You fight for the right cause, but the very way you fight for it undermines the cause. For example, cancel culture, the idea is what? Totally acceptable for me, of course. To fight for diversity and inclusion. But look at concrete cases. All they are basically doing is excluding those who don't accept their notion of inclusion, of diversity, and so on and so on.
So why hidden elitism? Why do you call it hidden?
Because for me it's absolutely clear that, and this is the source of the strength of Trump, that many of so-called, I am among them, I don't mean it in a patronizing way, many of so-called ordinary people, while in principle they are not against, but they have a problem with, may I put it in this way, the style of it, how it is done. And they are right to feel elitism with it, because I think that to a large extent, this cancel culture and so on, it's not truly the underprivileged who talk, who complain. It's the white liberals who talk for them. And I witnessed quite at least 15, 20 times in the US where a true underprivileged guy said something and the upper middle class liberal immediately crushed on him. No, you are using a language, it's against your own interest and so on. Sorry if I repeat an old joke of mine, but it's perfect. 20 years ago in Missoula, Montana, I was at a white debate where there was a Native American, and he simply referred to himself as Indian. Immediately, a white liberal attacked him. No, this is colonizing term and so on. And the native so-called American gave a wonderful answer. He said, Native American, sorry, the opposite of nature is culture, and you are then cultural Americans. Then he said, I definitely prefer to be called Indian, because at least my name is a monument to white man's stupidity, who thought they are in India. You know what I mean? Don't underestimate or so-called ordinary people or other races. They have an incredible sense of irony. They immediately detect when you are apparently brutal towards them. but at the same time, you are brutal in a sense of deep solidarity. How do we feel close? This is my hypothesis. It doesn't work in all the cases, but in many. You must exchange small potential obscenity, this means we are really close. It's not this respectful distance. Also, I don't like this focus on how you are called and so on. I consider myself, sorry if you don't agree with me, a crazy radical feminist. But for me, we should never forget feminism is not just, of course it is also this, I know, this subtle patronizing gesture. Feminism, to be a woman, is a very material thing, not only material in the sense of how you interact, but in a much more brutal way. I'm sorry, but to be a woman means birth. To be vulgar but friendly, in a feminist way vulgar. A man just does boom boom and goes to sleep. A woman has to deal with all of it. Period, birth, all the troubles and so on. For example, although she was half fascist, you know that here I respect Evita Peron in 50-51. She succeeded so that in Argentina, the first time in the world history, every woman who was employed got 2-3 days holiday when she has period. So you see, this is for me concrete feminism. Look at women, look at all the subtle ways how they are exploited and so on. That's what I am missing in all these debates, you know. Did you address her correctly and so on and so on.
Sure. We might come back a bit to kind of the politics of the left where lots of these discussions are happening, but I'd love to pick up a little bit on feminism. In the past, you've criticized Me Too feminism. This was a movement that galvanized quite a lot of the left and the center in a way that other movements haven't in recent years. Can you talk a bit more about why, despite this, you felt that it wasn't the right kind of way forward for the left?
You know, as a Hegelian, I believe in concrete universality. Don't be afraid of this. Concrete universality means for me something very, really concrete. Do you remember, I hope you don't, it wasn't a glorious time before Blair, government, between Thatcher and Blair, it was John Major. And at that point, when they began to fight against this, spending the public money for, I don't know, immigrant single mothers, a certain image emerged as the prototype, typical image. Ultimately, all the problems, and it's already doubtful if we should accept them as a problem, well, reduced to a figure of single unemployed mother. We have crime among youth, yes, too many single mothers, no paternal authority, and so on. Somehow they reduced all of it. We spend too much money, yes, because single mothers don't work. So she emerged in the Hegelian sense as a concrete universality, a particular figure which, for, of course, the right-wingers embodied all that was wrong with social democratic welfare state, whatever you call it. I'm claiming that there is something, I followed closely the debates. I'm claiming that something similar is happened with Me Too. Did you notice how there was a concrete scene? It was basically couples flirting, meeting in a pub or somewhere, and men in an all too violent way trying to seduce the woman with different forms of exploitation, pressure, and so on. Imagine, I will be very brutal, imagine a woman in her early mid-30s. She doesn't have a serious job. She has 2 children, and in the eyes of male chauvinists and so on, she's gradually losing sexual attraction. What should she do? It's not that the husband even beats her. The husband just, you know, is losing interest in her. she has no way, because of the children or whatever, to get a job of her own, what can she expect from her life? Isn't this much stronger despair? So for me, the beginning of feminism is childcare, education, all that. My God, here I am. I hope not a vulgar materialist, Marxist, but a materialist, you know. Freedom means what? A whole set of things. It's not just I can call you we, they, whatever you want. Freedom means I should have first, these are crucial things for me, at least a promise of, it's always imperfect, but that somehow it works, free healthcare, free education, and so on and so on. Without this, freedom means nothing. Here I remain a socialist. Yes, I'm not a Stalinist who says bourgeois freedoms are just formal freedoms. Yeah, they are formal freedoms, but that's why what we should fight for is to create material conditions. By material, I don't mean stuff, I mean social, institutional, and so on, conditions where these words, I'm free, blah, 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 have meaning.
You're in your 70s now.
76. I hate you for mentioning this. I am psychologically a woman. You never ask a woman how old she is.
I wasn't asking. I was saying. I was commenting on it. You are
even more 70s. Brutal. I love you. Perfect. Okay.
And you've got two boys, two grown-up children now. And I wondered, you know, you're talking about yourself there as a radical feminist, and I wondered, and you talked there also about the kind of material conditions and childcare and all these things. As a father, how has it in any way impacted in the way you raise your boys to be men in this world?
There's been a lot of discussion in the UK, but also in lots of kind of Western countries lately about raising young men and about the
You mean adolescence?
Well, yeah. So partly around this this TV show Adolescence, which I'd love to know your thoughts on. But more generally, you know, we've been talking recently about young men becoming isolated, becoming radicalized, and being drawn into these like right-wing, you know, sometimes kind of violent networks. What do you make of this as a trend? And also, I mean, what did you make of Adolescence as a kind of representation of that story?
Now I will say a couple of things which will sound horrible to some people. It's not necessarily a father. It can also an authoritarian mother to play this role. But the lesson is that authority within the family is needed. You know, in what sense? Because if Adorno, Horkheimer, Frankfurt School, saw this very clearly in late 1930s, when they said the new totalitarian leaders, Stalin, or for them especially Hitler, whatever Hitler is, he was not a figure of a father. He was more a kind of a obscene, spoiled, hysterical. He was maybe an adolescent brutal who came to power. So Adorno saw very clearly, and Horkheimer, they wrote a key text, Authority and Family, where they point out that, yeah, paternal oppression and so on. But at the same time, good, proper paternal authority gives you something to rely on and to defend yourself from the peer community, whose pressure can be much more destructive on you. You know, the worst thing about adolescent guys is to follow the peer pressure of their colleagues and so on and so on. And especially today, I think, look, whatever Trump is, he is not a respectful paternal figure. That's what I had to laugh. You remember that Vance, Zelensky, Trump infamous talk when they complained, you treat us to Zelensky disrespectfully. I'm sorry. Trump, who called Trudeau systematically governor to humiliate him, not prime minister. Trump, who, you know, you remember all his vulgarities, like, you can grab women by their pee and so on. Who is he to even mention respect? Who did everything possible? And I think I'm becoming kind of a, I like to define myself as communist, moderate conservative communist. Because I think that, okay, my old story, but it's important to mention it. Compare Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. As a person, Trump is a ridiculous postmodern obscenity, no respect. Bernie Sanders as a person, I know, I met him on the street in Burlington, Vermont. He is, in the best sense, not conservative in the sense that modest, dignity, respect, and so on. And I think that the left should break with this mega stupidity, of this is another legacy of 68, that to say that subversiveness is good. Do this, use dirty words and so on. No, sorry. The new populist right has beaten us by far on this. We, the left, to have a chance, should precisely address ordinary people with the message, no, be subversive and so on, but discover shame, respect and shame. That should be, it's surprising, this basic sense of respect, don't hurt others and so on. My idea is even that maybe we should openly appropriate the old term of moral majority. Sorry, whatever the populist right is, it's not moral majority. It's open decadence. And I see this not just as at a personal level, but maybe your view here is different. We can debate Israel, Gaza. But what horrifies me is, listen, I have no illusions. Other countries, Arabs, they are all torturing prisoners and so on. But with Israel now, what shocks me is how open this became. You remember, I had a couple of sleepless nights because, it was discovered that in a prison for Hamas members out of Jerusalem, they were doing horrible things. They were putting big iron rods with needles in it and so on up their ass. A couple of them died of bleeding, and they didn't deny it. They know these are subhuman, we can do it. I think better hypocrisy than this open admission of obscenity. And we are approaching a world where simply obscenity reigns directly.
Yeah. Something that's struck me in recent weeks is that when you see the populist right acting in a way, as you say, without shame, boldly breaking what the rest of us maybe thought of as rules or norms or just acceptable ways of behavior, we see often the left struggling to kind of criticize them. I'm thinking less of the horrors of Gaza, which you've mentioned, but also in France, we have Marine Le Pen, leader of a populist right party, and not only has the right kind of argued that she should be allowed to run in the next presidential election when the law says that actually she shouldn't, but also figures on the left, they also think that she should be able to run.
The left, I think, remains stuck to 68 model, and they don't see that they were beaten by the right. Look, let me give you an example, which if there is today a guy who is pure ultimate outcome of the 68 left, it's, sorry to tell you, Elon Musk. He respects no rules. He has this, for some leftists, confused life, makes obscene gestures and almost lives like a communist, In the morning he does Tesla, then he makes plans to go to Mars, then he fires 1,000 people there, then he had 14 or 13 children, everybody with different women and so on. He's this type of falsely liberated man. I think figure like Musk to become as powerful as he is only possible in the aftermath of the 68. He condenses everything that was wrong about 68. And the left, they at some level still identify as we did, I was there, I'm so old, in 68, you know, power is authoritarian. It is, but in the sense of dignity, and if you shout at them, do obscene gestures, whatever, there is something subversive in it. No, it's not. And I repeat always this point. The ultimate proof for me was the 6th of January. When was it? 5, 6 years ago. You remember when popular crowd invaded Congress? My friends, leftists, were crying. They said, where do we live? We, the people, should be doing this. This is their dream. A crowd penetrating seat of power. I told them, no, sorry. The new right took this over from us.
We started this conversation, Slavoj, by talking about 0 point and this kind of void on the left, the perishing of the left. It has to reinvent itself. We're recording this. We're in Britain, where we have a Labour government led by Keir Starmer. We wondered what you'd make of the Labour left here and the left in Britain in general. Is there a void? Is the void very visible here?
The paradox of the UK is now, I will be very brutal. You have one big moderate certain right party. It's called Labour Party. And then
They
you
might
have
not like
more.
to hear that.
I know. And then you have this remainders of a more populist, vulgar right, who notice this. It's important. Of course, it's a fake how they use women and other races, but as some people are telling me, look at the UK today. If you want extreme right in power, you have a black man or woman, Indian, and so on. If you want moderate right, Labour Party, you have mostly, I know Rachel Reeves and George, mostly white men. You know, don't underestimate the new right, radical right, how they have rediscovered minorities and so on. Minorities are not automatically on the left side. For example, I read a wonderful analysis how Democrats in the United States were depressed when they discovered that the majority even of immigrants, those who did gain right to vote, voted Trump. They didn't get a basic fact. Most of the immigrants believe in the United States. They want to get rich there. They didn't come there to make a revolution. You know.
Conservative.
Sorry?
They're conservative.
They are absolutely conservative. And you know who the first got this in the UK? Margaret Thatcher. Her overture to Indians, she noticed something that the Labour didn't take into account. The average Indian of ethnic origins in the UK, the average Indian was already slightly more wealthy than the average white British guy. No, the cards are really changing. We are entering, I think, a new, I'm quite brutal, open here, a new post-democratic era. And so my dream is not people will awaken, blah, blah, blah. Now, I will shock you. I think the left needs its own Trump. By Trump, he is a piece of shit. Don't misunderstand me. But what I mean, what usually people reproach him for is this dictatorial style. You know, he ignores even his own party, blah, blah, blah. But this is needed today. When was it already needed? Many people notice this. It's not the same content, of course, but sorry. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was also acting like that. Big authoritarian figure, direct contact with people. I think our liberal democracy is so not corrupted in this immediate sense, but inefficient and so on, that it may sound crazy for a leftist, but we do need a charismatic leader which will be able somehow to mobilize the people.
Just a quick kind of follow up on that. What do you said sort of dictatorial style? What do you mean? What is within the acceptable
what
limits
Trump
for you?
did, dictatorial style means you begin by proclaiming state of emergency, where I agree with Trump, just he didn't proclaim it for the right domains. first we should proclaim state of emergency for ecology and so on, And this then allows you to pass measures through, how to call this, presidential orders or whatever. Trump is doing all the time this, wherever he can. I have nothing against this forum. I think we are today in such a complex, a situation which is complex, but at the same time urgent. Acts are demanded, and I see no other way. I'm not afraid, oh, you want a leftist fascist. No, it works. I will even tell you, look at all successful left. There always was a charismatic leader, even if they fail. For example, what I like in Obama, but once he got elected, he was totally conformist. I liked his motto, yes, we can. That's what a true leader tells you. Not, I know better than you what you want, but I want to wake you up. My message to you is you can do more than you think that you can do. The situation is not totally predetermined and so on.
So how would you hold a leftist version of Trump accountable if you want someone who can, act with
No, there are,
so
wait a
direct?
minute, I'm not for pure dictatorial power, For me, there are still enough mechanisms, even in the United States. You cannot simply take a so-called dictatorial power take over. But look, what is to be done now urgently? And Europe is at its low point. Nobody confronts it. I don't like George Orwell, I must say. I'm sorry, I don't like George Orwell. But in 1984, what interests me now is, what's the situation that he describes? 3 mega blocks: Oceania, United States, Eurasia, and East Asia. Aren't we there today? United States, Russia wants to be Eurasia, and China, East Asia. And this is where we are going today. That's why Trump is so friendly with Putin. They speak the same language. Remember, Putin supported Trump's claim to Greenland and so on. The idea is we divide the world. Each of us has its own domain around. Europe is caught in between.
I have one final question for you.
Yeah, okay.
That's okay. You just outlined a very, I can use it's a slight cliche to say it, but a dystopian view of the world that we're living in now. Is there anything that makes you feel optimistic in any way about anything, about any of this?
I can only give you my, here and there are miracles. That's why I prefer to be a pessimist. If you're a pessimist, then from time to time something nice happens and you are glad. If you're an optimist, you're all the time disappointed. So no, I think we should be methodically pessimist, and that's the paradox. I don't have time to explain it, but in my book, that pessimism for me is not an attitude of, sorry for the vulgarity, that's my style, let's sit at home, watch Pornhub and do nothing. No, pessimism means the strongest possible call to mobilization.
Thank you so much, Slavoj. Thank you so much for joining us.
Don't forget about censor, be Stalin with a human face. Thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
This interview was from an episode of the Prospect podcast. To listen to the episode in full, including further discussion and our weekly banger and dud section, click the link in the description below. And to read more of Prospect's award-winning journalism, head to prospectmagazine.co.uk.